landed in Miami in the early morning, and I am so excited to feel the sunshine on my skin. The seasonal depression has been hitting me a little rough this year, and it's been so cold. And of course, with my luck, it was pouring rain as soon as we landed. We decided to take a walk on the boardwalk near where we were staying because it was still a lot warmer than back home. And while we were driving along the boardwalk, I couldn't help but get out of the car as soon as I saw the beautiful color palette of the ocean and the sky with the street lanterns glowing the bright orange color. I was literally a crazy person in this intense wind rainstorm taking photos because I knew I had to paint this. The colors were just so beautiful, and it was the perfect contrast between the blue and the orange. So when I was back in my studio, I decided to do the scene in my watercolor sketchbook. I just got this new one and I was excited to try it out, and I also felt like I could get the best representation of this image with watercolor, so I decided to use them. I'm starting with drawing out the scene in graphite first. That's usually pretty standard. And usually with watercolors, I get a little nervous to go in without any guide. And I salute the artists that can do that because that has always impressed me. But once I have some sort of structure lines ready for me, I'm starting to block out the main color shapes. This is definitely what you call the ugly stage, and I literally have to remind myself constantly to just trust the process. And I'm trying to really remind myself also to not focus on the detail or the little elements in the painting and just focus on the overall image and getting those massive shapes in there and accurate to the best of my ability to be as accurate as they can be. Then I decided to go in with ink. Truth be told, I was on a kick of trying out new supplies, and I got this new glass tool for inking, and it just looks so cool and fancy. And I've never used one of these before, and it was really beautiful and glides so nice. I felt like an old-timey folk. Outlining the areas that I feel would benefit the most from the ink. And I'm also trying to not overdo it with the black because it's very easy to feel like you need to outline every single branch and every single palm leaf. And I'm just really trying to focus on the stylization and not to go too crazy with the detail, because sometimes it looks a little too much. It doesn't give the effect that you're trying to give, or at least what I'm trying to give, of this looseness. Now I'm going back and forth with ink and watercolor to get the final details in. I over darkened some parts of this piece, but I'm gonna fix it with some gouache mixed in with my watercolors. We got lucky because the sun did end up coming out later in the evening, and we got to feel a little bit of the warmth just for a few hours. We decided to drive down to Palm Beach. It's an uber wealthy town in the south of Florida, but wow, the whole town is so gorgeous. I was completely blown away. We decided to walk around for a bit, and we stopped by a few galleries. There were so many in this town, and they had such beautiful architecture. It almost felt European, and it was just so nice and relaxing to walk around and look around. There were so many fun and beautiful fountains in the town, and I decided that would be my next scene to paint. I decided on this horse fountain because it was a challenge for me, and I loved the grandiose look of it overall. So I started with a wash of paint over the whole page to take away any white and just give it a nice base to start with. Although in hindsight, I probably should have used masking fluid on the fountain parts or any lighter parts, but oh well, next time. Then I'm adding more cerulean blue into the sky, and I'm adding warm tones to the fountain. As I'm adding the warmth to the fountain, I'm simultaneously blocking out the outside just because it was darker anyway, and it's helping me see the overall shape of the horses on the fountain. These horses were, boy oh boy, a challenge for me. I also think the reference photo that I screenshotted wasn't the best because I was getting so lost in the shapes and the values. I find that obviously a good reference photo really affects the overall painting, but whatever, we moved forward, nothing I can do now. I decided to add ink again just to keep up with the consistency, and also it's going to help me out a little bit with the shaping. I did it with a micron pen this time. They're my fave. They're waterproof, easy to use. So I outlined the fountain, the outside shapes to try to help visualize everything. I was honestly struggling a lot at this point. Overall, I don't think that it came out horrible, but there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. But it was really fun to try out the multiple horses. I've never painted anything like this particular scene before, so it was a good trial and error. Good morning. This morning, I spent the majority of my time drawing by the beach and by the pool, really just sketching, relaxing, enjoying the sun. I decided that I really wanted to go back to Palm Beach or Palm Spring. I always get them confused because it was such a beautiful place during the evening, and I kind of wanted to explore it during the day, and I felt like the town had a lot more to offer. So we took off on the 1.5-hour long drive. While walking around in town, I stumbled upon this building and I had to paint it. It reminded me of Spain for some reason. I think it was maybe like all the beautiful flowers growing on it, and I knew I had to capture it. I began with just mapping out some of the construction lines just to get an idea of where things will sit. Then we do the wash. I keep doing this wash on the whole page, and I don't know if it was the smartest choice for watercolor as a medium, but I've been working with a lot thicker mediums as of late, and the color wash has turned into like a little bit of a habit because the white feels very intimidating to me. Then I began blocking in the major shapes, colors, and the textures that I see. So this building obviously has a lot of vibrant colors, and I really want to capture it as well as the different textures that form on the building from the plants that sit on it, the windowsills. So I try to capture that to my best ability, and then I go back in with pencil to get the direction of the windows. There's just a lot of tiny detail on this building, and I feel like going in with pencil really helps me to make sure everything is balanced and placed correctly. And then I continue blocking in the shadow shapes, the darkest points of the painting. When I get to the point where I feel like I can go into more detail, I start with a thin liner, pushing all the details forward and adding some of the finishing textures. Gallery hopping again. I love to explore galleries. Sometimes I enjoy them a bit more than museums, because I love to see what artists of today are doing and what they're up to and how they're thinking and processing, how the art world's moving. There were so many galleries in this town, and it seemed like on every block we stumbled on a new one, and they were so fun to explore and such a source of inspiration. Up stumbling upon Pan's Garden, which was a beautiful botanical garden that was kind of hidden away in a back alley. It had a lot of Florida's indigenous plants, and it was an absolutely stunning place. It felt like a fairy tale, like a Disney princess's garden. I don't know. There was a lot of inspirational ideas, so I wanted to share some of the footage that I got with you guys in case you wanted to take a screenshot and paint it yourself. I always find gardens really inspire me and lead to a lot of different ideas, especially with like plants and insects and all that, kind of deciphering them and building the shapes out into other creations and ideas. It's always fun. The final piece I chose was a close-up of the same building that I had painted previously. I wanted to explore the flowers more closely, and I wanted to loosen up a bit from the previous piece. So I started with large blobs of color to make sure that we're keeping the composition and proportions of those big shapes, always checking one another, making sure they make sense in relation to each other. I find that when you're starting a piece that I really want to focus on those big shapes, because if you're focused too much on the detail, which a lot of beginner artists tend to do, you lose sight of the proportions of the big shapes, which honestly are more important, and especially in the beginning stages, than those tiny details. Then I'm starting to build up the shapes from the bottom up, almost thinking of it as in layers. What would be under what, starting from the undermost points. This is especially important for those flowers because the depth of them and how the light hits them and the shadow falls. I always try to look at it as just shapes, not the flowers, if that makes sense. So a lot of times I find that my brain, and a lot of people's brain, wants to fill in the blanks of how we think we see things or how we think things are supposed to be. And in reality, that's not what it actually looks like. So when looking at a reference photo or even from life, you want to really focus on the shape that you see, not what you think you're seeing. You really see a huge difference when you stop painting what you think you see and start painting what you're actually seeing. Even if it looks a little crazy at first, it'll eventually work out and make a huge difference and huge progress in your work. Then I went in again with Micron. I just wanted to keep a consistency with these series overall. After I decided to add some highlight points, I mixed again the white gouache and some yellow gouache and some watercolor paint just to really make some of those lighter points pop, give that illusion of sunshine hitting those plants.